On today's episode, we have James Maxey, who is the CEO of InjuryLawyers4U and Express Solicitors. We talk about how he went from having one job to building an 8-figure law firm. We talk acquisitions, we talk the firm's growth, marketing, and even the plan to double over the next 3 to 4 years. So it's a really great episode. I hope you enjoy. My name is Oli Eardley, and this is the Eardley Bird Business Podcast, which is always powered by our people. So where I'd like to start is just about your journey and how you've got to where you are now. So maybe the start of your career leading into today would be great.
Sure. Well, I mean, I don't know how usual a start to a lawyer's career it is. I think at school it was clear I wasn't going to be a mathematician, and things like accountancy were probably out. And I think you do hear that story repeated, that people go down towards the law route, perhaps because they're more of the talkers and they're stronger on the verbal IQ than they are the maths or the sciences. Oh, yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I was a bit of a natural arguer, you know, when they joke at you as a child and say, you'll make a great lawyer one day, which of course is, I think, a veiled insult. Yeah. You know, I think, you know, I always liked organizing people and talking my way into things. And yeah, I slowly progressed through to doing law. I wasn't brilliant at school. I should have worked harder. So I've actually got, I got a grade E in A-level law, actually, which is not very good. And I wouldn't recommend that. Don't do that, kids out there. Work harder at school, as I'm telling my children now, who are both doing their GCSEs this year. And so I did an external London law degree, which is basically you could get in with the lower A-level grades, and my poor old parents paid the fees. And so I got an LLB honours, a Bachelor of Laws degree, third class, not at the top of the tree. And then I got a job with a smallish firm in Manchester. It had 16 offices dotted around, and I actually got a good training there. So not a conventional route in, and I probably should have worked harder. But when I got into the job, I fell into something I loved.
Perfect. And what made you want to move into your own firm?
I suppose I'm not going to be too shallow about it. I saw fairly early on that, you know, the opportunity in that type of firm. There's a lot of different law firms out there. There are big corporates where you can get up the greasy corporate pole and make, you know, quite good money. But really, in terms of the financial returns, owning a firm of that type was going to be better than working in it. And also, I was really interested in business. So the law was interesting, and I had 4 or 5 years learning that pretty well and doing the work and loving every minute of it. But I always wanted to go on a sort of management course rather than a black letter law course to sort of broaden out my skills. So the interest in the business and, to be blunt, the financial driver.
Perfect. And you mentioned that the type of firm. What specifically about the type of firm was attractive to you?
Well, I've always been a personal injury lawyer, so I fell into a firm which did, I mean, the personal injury law changed over the years. The high street law firms used to do everything. You know, go back to the 1980s and 90s, you'd put your suit on and you'd go down to the lawyer and they would do the conveyancing for your house. If you got done for shoplifting, they would help you. If you needed a divorce, they would help you. If you had an injury claim, they would help. They would do everything. Any legal problem that came along, they would have generalists, you know, like GPs, lawyers. And what happened is a lot of the legal aid went away from that sector. Government change came and funding was tightened. And a lot of firms specialized in personal injury because it was still fairly profitable back at that time. Even shouldn't call them routine accidents, because every personal injury is distressing for the person who has it. But the less severe ones were fairly profitable back in those days, and people specialized in them. I kind of got into law about that time, did a few different things in my training contracts, some family law, some criminal law, but basically got into doing mostly road accident, personal injury work. And, you know, I found I was good at it. I liked getting the money from the insurers for people, and that was the type of firm it was. And when I was ready to set up, that's what I'd learned. So I carried on doing more of the same.
Perfect. And those earlier years as a business owner, how was it sort of setting up and doing it all yourself in the early stages?
Oh, wow. I'm not sure I could go back and do it again. Glad I was younger. I did it just about the time I was 30. And I think I mean, it was, for me, it was pre-kids and things. So there was that advantage that I could afford to pay myself half the money I'd been on for 2 years, manage with the old car. I had a little house at the time, and, you know, I could cut my cloth and start small. I wish I'd started a bit bigger. You know, you don't know when you're young and you're fearful of somehow losing or failing. So, you know, you can only start with the resources you've got. And my brother was kind enough to lend me a bit of money, and then that allowed me to get a bit of money out of the bank. So yeah, it was tough starting small. I wish I'd started a bit bigger. And it was literally everything. I mean, screwing my desk together, plugging the phone into the wall, renting the office, getting a photocopier. The sheer mechanics of it. My secretary trusted me enough to follow me across from the firm I used to work for. And off we set up, and quite quickly needed to hire other staff and got the work on board. So it was obviously doing everything at first. Things you don't think of at all of as a lawyer, like setting up the petty cash systems and plugging the computers in and trying to make, and I've no IT skills at all, despite owning hundreds and hundreds of computers, I suppose, nowadays. So all of that was hard.
Perfect. And before starting your own business, had you done any businesses before Express? Or
No, I literally trained in a law firm, qualified as a solicitor in that. You basically need to be qualified for 3 years as a solicitor. So you're kind of 5 years into a law firm for your minimum before the regulation authority will let you set up. I mean, there's ways of getting waivers, but basically that's the journey, minimum time. So that's kind of the age at which you can set up a law firm. So no, I literally have had almost one job. Well, the one job where I trained, and then, if you like, the same job, but for myself.
Perfect.
My whole career. Now, as you can see from the grey hairs, I'm approaching the other end of the career. So one job, me.
It's incredible to go from one job and then build a really great business that you've been able to build. So yeah, congrats to you on that. So it'd be great to hear about where you are now, and as I Express, what does the firm look like today?
Oh yeah, so I mean, it's really good. It's one of the number one law firms. I say that because it depends on the measure. There's different sorts of personal injury firms. Some might do only the most severe, what we call catastrophic injury claims. Some might do only very high volumes of road accident claims. We do the spread right across. So we're the biggest, or one of the biggest, in that sort of sector. We get our work direct from the consumer by advertising. So we spend a fortune every year on, various internet-based primarily types of advertising, and have a big internal call center that screens through the work and brings it in. So in numbers, what are we now? We're a little over 750 people. Turnover will be 70 odd million this year, and is moving sharply upwards. We're growing rapidly at the moment. We have 24 or so thousand clients at the moment, live clients of one sort of injury or another, which is pretty big in the personal injury sector. We want to double that, and we will double that over the next 3 to 4 years, in terms of the clients' numbers and the turnover. We pretty much have a plan that we can follow. It's almost got easier as we've got bigger, being able to predict the growth. I touch wood and all that, because still plenty of challenges.
Sure. When you say easier when you've got bigger, what do you mean?
Well, when you're a smaller law firm, the bank says, well, how much is your house worth before they do your bank loan? And when you're a bigger law firm, you eventually convince them that you have this work in progress. That's what lawyers call WIP. All of the files in the filing cabinets or in the computer now, which are going along, and a percentage of those will succeed and pay money. And therefore we can very accurately model our income from what is in the, open files now. And so eventually you basically get the bank to lend against your stock. It'd be the equivalent of a furniture factory lending against the stock, the tables they'd already built. But if you're in the sort of small banking end of the bank, they're very worried about. I mean, personal injury is a sector where some firms have failed, so they've lost money sometimes, the banks.
Sure. No, that makes perfect sense. So obviously you've grown to a really good level. What would you say has been the key to that growth? You mentioned internet marketing, but it'd be good to hear from you what that looks like.
Yeah, well, in terms of getting the work right, I would honestly say that we've always majored on the people we employ and the training, and to be blunt, getting the wrong people off the bus if they're not right for us and they don't want to work hard and they don't want to get on board with the program. Because you can demoralize your best people if you carry people who aren't going to give their all. So you've got to build a brilliant team, and you've got to, put your whole life into that, really. In terms of getting the physical work through the door, well, the days of the clients ringing you and so on, well, I suppose they would ring you, but as a result of an accident. I mean, it's a distressed purchase, right? Personal injury. Somebody wants to buy a new pair of Louboutin shoes. You don't want to be injured and have to make a personal injury claim. But if you are injured and you're off work and you've got earnings losses, well, maybe you need to, so people won't typically have your number for the eventuality I'm going to get injured, so I'll keep Express Solicitors' phone number in my phone. We wish they would, but we don't wish they're injured, of course. So you're advertising to them sort of when they've been injured, whether they be recovering at home or perhaps people who've had an injury a year or two ago and been thinking about it, but eventually decide, perhaps having seen several adverts maybe from different companies, eventually phone one of those companies.
Sure.
Our main medium in that regard is InjuryLawyers4U. I'm the CEO of that, as well as Express Solicitors. And that's a consortia of solicitor firms who pay in to pool the advertising to make a bigger budget than one firm could, although our firm now is the vast majority of the budget because we've grown strongly over the last decade or so. So that's a fairly well-known brand out there, and you might see our lions on YouTube and other things. We're very proud of them advertising there, and we think we've got good, strong creatives. So the actual work that goes out is with a little bit of TV now, because there is a sort of over 55 demographic we're still interested in, of course. And with injury work, it's quite hard to pick your demographic. Anybody can be injured. Company director can be injured. Unemployed chap walking along the street can be injured. So people say, what's your demographic? And if you were selling luxury cars, you'd have a very, you'd define demographic, age, sex, income stream, type of personality, whatever. So we do sort of have to advertise with quite a wide net saying, have you been injured? Any sort of injury, we can help you. And the other thing we do with the business is we make sure we can do every sort of injury, because if you're going to spend, we're spending 10, 12 million a year on different forms of marketing, very big expense. When you think law firms years ago had zero in for marketing or a little bit of hospitality in the budget, and now that's a big line in there. So the economics of businesses like mine are completely different to what they were 30 years ago. And so if you advertise like that and somebody has had, I don't know, a dog bite, and the dog's come from a house where it's an insured dog, if you like, and it's bitten you, and there can be a claim, we need to be able to do that. And we need people who do those sorts of claims. We need people who do holiday accidents. We need people who do shipping accidents. So in a way, you need to cover the weird and wonderful, as well as obviously the more typical accident at work or whatever.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you have people within your firm that deal with different types of
right? Yeah, if it's a small niche, one lawyer might do a couple of them, if you know what I mean. So they'll be in departments. So we have an employer's liability department, basically accidents at work. We have a road accident department, fairly self-explanatory. We have clinical negligence people. We have technical occupiers and public liability. But if you think of that as sort of tripping up and having accidents on premises or the highway in simple terms. So we have those specialties. And within that OL and PL department, to use the abbreviated jargon, we'll have the subspecialists, the little niches of people who will know the accident for boating accidents, where there are different rules of the road for boating, different limitation periods, different conventions covering how much compensation you get. Obviously, claims might be abroad, and there can be foreign law elements. It might have a worker on an oil rig. That's different to a ship. You need to know a lot of detail because most accidents, there's a period of 3 years where you need to bring the claim. If you're an adult on an aeroplane, it's 2 years. So you better know that, or you're going to get into a mess. And that's just one of a million little examples of where the law differs, and you need ideally subspecialists. And those specialists will, for example, having done that work before, they will know the experts. So if you have an accident on a horse, you're on a horse riding lesson, the horse behaves badly, chucks you off, bites you, whatever it might be. Topic close to my heart because we've got a few other things at home. You will need somebody who knows the relevant horse riding experts to work out if that was normal behavior for the horse, abnormal behavior, to help you win your case. So your lawyer is doing more than knowing law. They're knowing the individual process and the relevant experts, the barrister that specializes in that work. They're like a manager pulling a team together of experts for you.
Yeah, so it goes back to what you're saying about having the right people in the right roles. Yeah, so that makes perfect sense. So you mentioned TV as one of the mediums to get to advertise, to get in front of people. You also mentioned internet marketing. I'm guessing could you talk me through that? I don't want to make any assumptions.
Yeah, a very high level. Most of what we do goes through that IL4U brand because that brand is better known than Express
Yep.
Solicitors.
Yeah.
We do a little bit of pay-per-click under the Express brand for things like housing disrepair, which are not an injury; they're a different sort of claim. So we do some claims which are not personal injury, but the vast majority of what we do is for people who've been injured, negligently by someone else, effectively, or because of the fault of someone else. And so, yeah, most of the budget is on forms of pay-per-click, type response. And we do an awful lot on YouTube, where we find that their videos and short videos to be a useful way of, conveying the message. That's. Look, I'm not the expert there. We have people that do that. I kind of control the budget and sit in a couple of times a year on the big meetings where we decide sort of key strategy or new creatives, and there are people monitoring it week to week. So I don't want to go off my expert area here.
Sure.
But that's a very granular job. For example, if you're clicking on keywords for broken leg south of England, you may notice the spend for that is going up and the number of claims coming in is going down, and you may need to adjust midweek the budget and change it to no win, no fee, one of the more generic but expensive phrases that people are punching in.
Yeah.
You want to get as many, obviously, inquiries as possible, but clearly you want to do a bit of filtering. If we got a load of people who wanted a divorce because they'd seen no win, no fee, that wouldn't help us, for our work. Then again, if you advertised only for serious injuries, you actually wouldn't get enough response. I mean, thankfully, there are relatively few very serious injuries out there.
Yeah.
And anyway, the public don't particularly differentiate. I mean, a broken thumb to somebody is a serious injury.
Yeah, that's true.
We might have in our mind a value or an amount of injury, but obviously injuries affect people completely differently. They're all sort of distressing and painful to an extent. So yeah, we're constantly monitoring the budget and adjusting it, and changing strategy and keeping the creative effectively like a TV ad, but it's broadly going out on the internet, keeping that fresh and up to date. You can see them tiring if you use the same advert too much.
Yeah, that's
Once
true.
you've got a big budget, you will see the drop off, and then you can maybe refresh the advert with a re-edit. But eventually, you're going to have to spend more money, with the creative people. And we work with some great people. The Gate are a fantastic creative company in Manchester, doing film and TV ads for many big companies, and they're great budgets. Great to see, great to see that all up in Manchester. That creative. You don't have to go to London for that nowadays. Nothing anti-London, but nice to see, all that creative industry doing really well up in the Northwest. I don't know if that's a function of the BBC coming up here or what, but there's lots of good creative and lots of good digital marketing companies, as you know, up here in the Northwest.
So you mentioned some really key areas there. So PPC makes complete sense to me because you're a reactive type of service, right? If you've injured yourself, you're going to go look for it. So that makes perfect sense. YouTube, from a brand awareness perspective, makes a lot of sense because it's quite a cheap way of doing it. So does TV nowadays. It's actually a lot cheaper than it probably used to be. You could probably advise me on that.
Yeah, TV's hard to monitor what you're getting, but there is that demographic. If you think of, I don't know, motorcyclists, 55, 65, I'm not saying people our age aren't on smartphones. Very many of them are, and very many of them are very IT adept. But there is a market out there for one or other of the forms of TV now. I mean, it's obviously a very complex marketplace. It's no longer, 5 terrestrial channels.
Yes, that's true.
I mean, when IL4U launched, it was 100% TV, and then over a very long, that was sort of 2000-ish, and then it went, I'm going to probably get the dates wrong here, but by about 2012 or something, it was 50% TV, 50% internet. Things like the smartphone are a relatively new invention. You've got to keep reminding yourself. People didn't have them in 2000. Yeah. I don't know when they came along. I want to say 2005 or 6. People started getting smartphones. So I'm old enough to remember the no mobile phone stage, and then the Nokia with the little texting stage, and then the smartphone. So there is a section of the audience out there that aren't constantly looking at Facebook, believe it or not. TikTok or wherever we need to be now.
That's actually incredibly interesting because you've gone throughout that whole phase, really, haven't you? So you've gone from really focusing on television when that was the key to getting in front of people, and
Sure.
then that slowly adjusted to the internet taking more
Yeah,
of
I
that,
mean,
that share.
TV was all about at one time doing a really good deal where you spent loads of money in advance for 6 months or a year, and you locked in to get a brilliant price because you kind of knew there's
That
only
was the way
TV
to do
out
it,
there. Other than putting on the back of a bus or some outdoor. If you want big hitting ads, you've got to do TV.
Yeah.
And the internet has just, Google has displaced that big time, hasn't it?
Yeah, huge. The one area I want to ask you about is social, because it's
Mm.
obviously not a reactive platform in a way, but it'd be interesting to know if you're doing anything on there.
Yeah, we do a fair bit, and we do a bit of this geo-specific. So basically, if you've walked past a building site a few times, we might identify that we're guessing that you might be involved in the bit, or a hospital, quite frankly. I mean, there is that cleverness built into the technology, depending on where people have set their settings on their phones to. So we will try and hit the adverts onto the people who might be the audience. Yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, not everybody loves personal injury lawyers, and there's a sort of bad connotation from the days of not companies like mine, but companies offshore and whatever, cold calling. 5-10 years ago, I mean, everybody used to get the calls. There's £5,000 waiting for your accident. I haven't had an accident.
Yes,
Somebody's phoning you up. It's not great. That's pretty annoying. There's been, a fair crackdown. I mean, it's not perfect yet because that still goes on in a small way, but there's been a bit of a crackdown on those numbers and those people doing that. And obviously our rules as solicitors quite rightly preclude us from taking work sourced from sort of cold calling. And the only people we're dealing with have responded to an advert we've placed. It's their choice. They don't have to ring the number or reply to the website. So I don't know if that helps you in that regard.
Yeah, no, it does. So it's interesting that I really like that it's quite clever that you've done the geographic targeting for, I presume it's Meta that you've used that for.
Yeah. I mean, the technical people would tell you, more precisely, and unfortunately, you're not dealing with. I'm a little bit when they were doing computing in school, I thought it wouldn't catch on. So slightly, I was just the age where I could have gone either way. I could have really learnt about them on the ZX Spectrum 81 or whatever it was our school had back in the day, but I decided that wasn't going to catch on, and now, of course, I've had to catch up and teach myself a little bit just to keep up.
No, that's perfect. Like that's really interesting to hear about where you're putting your marketing resources. What I'd like to talk about next is your goals for the coming year and where you're looking to take the business. So I wonder if you could talk me through that.
Yeah, well, as I've said, we've got growth on the horizon. We've always been about growth. We think standing still is on the way to dead as a business. We want to create jobs. We want to promote people. We want our assistant solicitors to become associate solicitors. We want our associate solicitors to become partners, and at all other grades in the firm, because obviously we have IT and finance and all the other functions of a fairly large business. So there's career paths for people there. We love training the lawyers. We have something like 80 or 90 trainee solicitors at any given moment. So we're, it's like a university sometimes when you come into our place. And in fact, for 8 weeks when they come in from the colleges of law with those qualifications, we do our own course in-house. We have lawyers who do nothing but train other lawyers. That's their full-time job. Experienced people who've run their own firms and know what's what. They teach them our systems and process, but they make sure they're exactly up to speed on the law we need and the soft skills, client care, listening, the skills of taking a witness statement and gathering information, all of that stuff, how to be professional and deal with it and deal with the stresses of the job, because it's a targeted job. You're dealing with people with nasty injuries sometimes who are sometimes in a nasty place in their life. They're really struggling. So we do all of that. Where do we want to take the firm? I mean, we can't discuss specific business plans. We're obviously always in discussions with people. We've raised finance recently, and that's in order to get more work. In fact, this morning I was in Liverpool talking to a law firm we've just bought. So we do a fair amount of M&A, and I expect to announce another one next week. They're so fresh I can't announce the names just now, but they will be. I should think by the time this blog is aired out there, so we'll have done 2 acquisitions. There'll be about, I think, our 16th and 17th acquisition of one sort or another since we started a sort of twin track of organic growth and occasionally acquiring smaller competitors to grow. And that's great because we get the people, which is fantastic, as well as the work. And so we're very interested in these firms we're acquiring. We're talking to a third one. We don't know how that one will go yet. It's early days, but we have the budget to do a good couple of, it depends how big the firms are, it could be 4 small ones or 2 big ones, Peter, but we have a budget to buy up, other firms. And there's a sort of demographic in our industry where there are a lot of people who went in to specialize in personal injury, as I spoke to you at the start of the session. And some of those are coming up to retirement now age, and it's not as, in the past, it would always be selling to the junior partners, and that now is sometimes a route to retirement for the older partners. But sometimes the junior partners are happy with the job and being employed, but not owning the equity. So the model is slowly changing, or firms like ours are becoming almost too big for the partners to buy. They're becoming corporates, and so you have to corporatize them for the future. And whether that's listing on AIM or dealing with private equity or doing a mega merger with another big one. You do need to. So we are thinking in the very long term about succession. But, I'm 54. There's no immediate panic on that. We're just correctly planning. I mean, obviously, it isn't my ambition to retire one day and just leave everyone behind with no plan. We've got a business. We've got a fantastic board. And I mean, we've talked about what I've done in this blog. That's because the others aren't here. I've got a fantastic group of people who run the business with me. So, we're getting organised for the future, but really it's just more growth at the moment. There's a very fragmented market, personal injury firms. There are, on the defendant side, so doing the work for insurers, defending the claims we bring, there's probably 4 or 5 big firms, and probably 3 of those are giant. And more or less have all the work between them. On the claimant side, there's probably, at one stage there were 8,000 firms claiming to do claimant personal injury. I think there's about 4,000 now that claim to do a good amount of their work is claimant personal injury. So, some of those, without being rude, must be tiny because the number of claims per year is, depending on how you measure it, leaving the tiny road accident whiplash claims, which go on a fixed tariff now, leaving those out, there's about 500,000, 400,000 claims per year, number of accidents. And you can tell that data because the compensation recovery unit log every single compensation claim. So there is firm data on total numbers. And if you then divide that into the number of firms claiming to do it, some of them must be very small. So I think I've always said a marathon, not a sprint, but there is going to be this amalgamation where people like me buy up a couple of firms a year and gradually get bigger. And that's the exit route for some people who want to retire or who need to bring capital in to grow or whatever.
That makes perfect sense. And the phrase you used before was double within 3 to 4 years.
Absolutely. We're that ambitious.
Would that be staff or would it be revenue?
With sort of caseloads and then revenue follows, there's a lag obviously with personal injury work because we do know in no fee we get paid when we finish. So it's 2 or 3 years before you get paid for some of these injury claims, and for the very big ones even longer. So there's a very strange sort of accounting lag. I call it a malt whiskey distillery. You've got to wait 10 years till you can sell a 10-year-old malt. You don't make any money for 10 years. It's not quite that bad, but just as an example, there is this. You spend the advertising money in one period, you spend the processing money in another period, you make the money in another period. So you need it's very cash consumptive, and it's a fairly slow return on your cash. It's a good business and it pays well at the end if you get all the little bits of it right. You don't lose too many. You get maximum value for the clients because you're getting a percentage of that in a no fee lawyer's world, so you're very aligned with the client. You want to win because you don't get paid if you don't win. You want them to get a lot because you don't get a lot unless they get a lot. It's very, very aligned with the customer, and I do love that. Our work. But that's what's hard about growing. But by any of the normal measures, staff, caseload, and ultimately turnover and ultimately profit.
The firms that you're buying, I take it, do they have a similar model to you in terms of no win, no fee?
Yeah, they're all pretty much no win, no fee of one sort or another. Some of them maybe have a niche. There are lots of different types of accident claim, and so some people might be, experts only in employment accidents, and they don't want to do anything. Some people might only do motorcycle accidents. I mean, there are big and small niches. Certainly, there are firms that only do the very valuable, more catastrophic injury work, and we do that. And several lawyers who do that. I just think that it's still pretty bad if you've merely broken your leg and had 3 months off work, and I think you still need representation, even though you're not catastrophic to a personal injury law. It's still pretty serious.
Yeah,
But if your employer has, whatever, left something out that's tripped you up and caused that injury. So we want to do the whole range. But yeah, those are the measures really for growth that we want. As I say, the fees catch up a couple of years behind, sadly.
Something I didn't even think about.
Yeah, it's a big cash, thing. Whereas, a business like your own will, broadly be selling a service and getting paid within the same financial year, sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
We have this very unusual. We get a tax break, not for no fee lawyers, but for any contingent business, there is a tax break, if you like, and allowable. So say you were an architect and you were building an office block and you got paid when the foundations were done, you got paid, and then when it was up to level 20, you got paid. And the work was contingent on it getting to that stage. You can defer the tax until you do get paid.
Right. Okay.
So there's a little bit of help from the revenue. You in on revenue. Perhaps I shouldn't mention it. They might take that tax break away.
I
but,
know, we can edit that out.
It's an unusual business financially to follow the graphs through.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And to hit those targets then, to double by 3 to 4 years, is that mainly going to be done through acquisitions, or are you planning on growing through marketing, other channels?
It's literally both. It's about half of each. Obviously we're settling claims the whole time, so just to stay level, you're already running fast in the hamster wheel with your marketing and whatever, and keep that conveyor belt moving. So to drive it forwards takes some effort. And the acquisitions are helpful for that, because in a way you're buying on average half done work. So you're halfway nearer to finishing. You've done half the journey. I mean, I'm simplifying a bit there, but that is helpful about the acquired work. But there is a lot of integration effort, and you can get it wrong. You can have a bunch of people you don't gel with who, the culture's very different, and you lose a lot of them, and then you're left with a lot of work and no people to do it, and it's stressful. And of course it comes in a bulge by its very nature when you acquire something. I can't acquire it 10 cases this week, 10 cases next week, all whatever it is, 3,000 arrive this week. And so there's a big IT bulge of getting them set up on systems, and fee owners going a bit over their caseload while they get used to assimilating it. Even if you're taking people on, you get a bulge of work for your business and a bulge of training for those people who you're trying to bring into your systems. And you're trying to deliver a uniform service. So there are challenges with the acquiring work, but it definitely helps you keep growing a little bit faster than organic.
Yeah, I mean, when I've talked to people about acquisitions previously, a lot of the issues have been about losing clients or having like a small drop off of people leaving. But how does that work out with what you guys do? Because are they already kind of tied into a relationship with those companies?
Yeah, we're lucky with clients. I mean, the beauty of the client situation for us is that because we pick up the advertising budget of advertising business to consumer, direct to the consumer, not that I ever wish to lose a client, but if one client decides we're not great or we're too slow or whatever it is and chooses to instruct another, it is one client. And so obviously I need to keep the service levels right and not have that, you don't want death by 1,000 cuts. Clearly you've got to produce a good job for those clients, and I care deeply about each and every one of them. But I don't have a supplier giving me 10,000 a month who might change the price in September when he reviews his panel, or decide he's giving it to another law firm because of whatever reason. So I'm insulated a bit and that's a deliberate choice. Obviously there's a lot of personal injury work available through panels from insurance companies, from, I don't know, the police federation has a lot of work for injured police people. Trade unions have a lot of work for people injured at work who are union members. And we've typically seen nothing wrong with what the police fed and trade unions do representing their members. Fantastic work. But we don't particularly want to be the panel. I mean, rudely, I sometimes say, a bit like being a milk farmer to Tesco's. They're very big. They can put the price up. They can vary it. And again, I'm not trying to be mean to either Tesco's or a milk farmer. But we like the fact that we don't have too much worry of losing the clients. When you take on a firm, the clients do have a choice about moving to you as you start to close that firm down. And if you don't give them a good service, they will vote with their feet. And all law firms lose a few clients to another law firm, although you kind of agree your bit of the fee comes back at the end. And you don't want that to happen. But losing clients isn't a massive problem. Losing people could be a problem. We've had mixed experiences with the law firms we bought, to be honest. We've probably got better at doing it. But yeah, we've had ones where people sort of say, don't want to be in a big firm, think you might have aggressive targets. I mean, we do have quite punchy targets. We're about success and working hard, heard things about us, whatever, maybe it's one person from that firm perhaps poisons the water or decides they don't like us, or, very hard to know, but you can have ones where one person decides not to come and then a raft of them do. And it's a real shame. I mean, I always say to those people, why don't you just try us for a couple of months?
Yes.
Captivity.
Yeah.
If we got two heads and we start, taking your pay off you or something, obviously I'd expect you to find another job. But give us a chance, I always say. And of course, we've got loads of people who've very happily morphed across from other firms and been with us for many years. So it is a mixed bag. And of course, humans are a mixed bag. And I don't think, I've never myself been able to tell an interview for sure whether I'm getting perfect employees or not. There is always a failure rate after interview. I don't know anybody in the world who's got it right. Watson laser test or whatever. And when you take on a firm, I think it would be naive to think that all 50 of those employees will still be with me in 5 years. Clearly, some of them won't. The question is, will the main good ones and the bulk of them have transferred across? And if that's the case, and I've had them for a few years, then double benefit of buying that firm.
Yeah, perfect. And would you say through the process of acquiring businesses, do you feel like you've got, as a company, a lot better at doing it?
They say jokingly, don't they? I mean, we've done about, it would be 17, I think, different deals, because some of them are pre-packs or caseloads rather than buying the firm as what we call a successor practice. But we've done about 17 deals. And some people say that means you've done 17 different deals, in the sense that there's something new from each transaction and there's no lesson to be learned. But clearly we've learned some of it. Yeah, we've got a little bit slicker at doing the due diligence, understanding the sale and purchase contracts. If it's a tiny one, we might do the contracting ourselves. We still work with our corporate lawyers, O'Connors in Liverpool, who are great partners of ours, on a bigger transaction, to make sure we get the contracting exactly right for all sides. So we have been through the process a bit more and understand, because we had to teach ourselves that we're personal injury law. I mean, people think you're a solicitor, you're a contract drafting solicitor. Well, I'm not. I'm a personal injury solicitor. I know about the injuries, the law relating to personal injury and all of that. And then there's a whole other load of law when it comes to buying and selling businesses. And businesses could be a partnership, a sole trader, an LLP, a limited company. We've done one of everything. And therefore you have to learn how to transfer those companies and do the paperwork and negotiate the terms. So we've got a bit slicker, but I would say that each deal and the industry changes. Over the 15 years we've been doing it, there have been big changes to how much you make per case. The insurers have had a very good run of reducing the legal fees and basically shifting the burden onto the injured people, which is very unfair. Hasn't really affected us, because we have charged them that money, because that's what the change in the law was. The people it's affected are the people who are not getting their full compensation, which is anybody who's injured in this country. You see with car insurance, the insurers promised for the low-cost claims portal that kind of cut the lawyers out mostly, with fixed tariffs for different whiplash injuries. They promised that everybody would save 40 quid a year on their car insurance. They've worked out over the 3 years since it's been running, people have saved on average, I mean, how they do these actuarial sums, I don't know, £10 across the 3 years.
Right. Okay.
Most people would rather, if they're badly injured in an accident, for the sake of £3.33 a year, would rather have just had it left the way it was. But the insurers have done very, very well out of it, and that's what matters. At the time they were getting that law passed, there were 40 Conservative MPs in power who had declared interest in the insurance industry. So you can draw your own conclusions.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm not going to get into that.
I haven't named anyone, don't we? We're okay. We're okay. We're on firm ground.
In terms of being a larger firm, then, what would you say is the main advantages? And you've mentioned a few already. And then what are the biggest challenges of being a bigger firm?
I mean, the advantage is some obvious things. You do get some economy of scale, so you can try and drive down your price per square foot in your bigger office block and your stationery suppliers and whatever. You get a few reverse effects, like because you're bigger, you have to comply with this level of legislation or do that, or whatever. You get hammered because you're big as well by the taxman and the government. But there's some obvious economies of scale, bulk buying of computers and things, bulk buying of advertising, and being able to be big enough. I mean, with our budget, we can get out there on Google and get onto page one. The worst outcome in the world is if you continually appear in row 30 on page 2 or 3 of Google, you're probably spending $500,000 a year and getting nothing. It isn't linear. You've had a terrible disaster if you don't make it. You've got to have the weight of spend, and you don't stay there. If you don't keep spending, your place is gone. So we've got the money to make sure work flows in. So those are the good things, and you get a bit of from my point of view as a CEO. I'll tell you what, the worst time to run a law firm was when I had about 30 people. I hated it. There was a period for a year or two where I seriously thought about chucking it in, and that's because I was taking the sick phone calls from staff in the morning. I was doing client files still. I didn't have a accountant or a finance director. I had a very junior bookkeeper. I was trying to do the accountancy stuff. You didn't have a team. Now I've got a fantastic HR team. Of course, I get involved in very senior HR stuff if there's a major issue with a partner, but I don't have to hire every single person or deal with every single illness or whatever it is. Fantastic finance team, absolutely great FD, brilliant operations and IT people. You worry about cybersecurity, but at least I've got people who know what they're doing working on it, better than me trying to fix it. So there is, I think there's a sort of terrible time in business where you're too small. You either need to be a one-man band or break through. We decided to break through and dig in and spend more money and hire some, HR and other helpers and just get there. We kind of hired first, got the work and pushed through it. So the bigness brings a proper board, and you can afford
structure.
And if you're struggling for something, you can buy in help. If you have a legal challenge for the business and you want to buy in a very expensive KC to advise you, then the £10,000 feels a lot better when you've got a big business than when you're a tiny business. So you can afford to stand up to regulators or people who are pushing you around in the industry if you've got a problem. So those are the advantages. I suppose disadvantages would be, how do you keep it collegiate and friendly? Slightly miss those days where we came in the morning, opened the post. I'm showing you, I'm going back now, opened the paper post with a letter opener, got the checks out, and everybody knew the 500 claims we were doing, and the trainee solicitor was getting direct training from you there and then, and off everybody went back to their desk. Now you need an office manual, you need a whole load of online learning resources, because obviously there are lots of people working for me, and regretfully I don't know the names, and that's a shame. Much as you try and walk the floors and say hi to people, you don't really know them, and you don't know their family, and I don't think we have a bad place, and we have lots of social events and things going on, and a really vibrant equality and diversity group and other people in the firm. And I think the smaller groups do break up and do their socials. They have a budget for it, certainly. I kind of wander around, letting people in, not sure if they work here or not, It's just a different feeling, and I hope that people don't feel it's impersonal and big. We want to not become one of those giant faceless places.
I guess it'd be very difficult to know 750 people individually.
Sure, and lots of new hires all the time because, at the junior, and there is churn at the junior end. Some people come and find it's not for them and they're right at the start of their career. And if somebody wants to go and be a surf instructor in Australia, I mean, maybe they should, if that's what they want to do. Not everybody wants to be a lawyer in an office. I've only got the jobs I've got. Personal injury lawyer or personal injury lawyer is what I've got for them.
That makes sense. I thought it was really interesting what you're saying about the sort of 30-person sort of team, where that's probably the most difficult point. Because you're big enough where it's like you've got quite a lot of work to be doing, but you're too small to just pass off that work and delegate it to all the right sort of people. So that's really interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that going in, to be fair. That makes sense. Anything new for this year, technology-wise, or
well, I mean, look, we're having a good look at AI. We, as a policy, don't want to be on the bleeding edge of AI. We think people could spend a lot of money developing stuff which might be available off the shelf soon. I've always been one of those people who has last year's iPhone, you know what I mean? I don't mind getting a new one every 3 years, but I don't have to have, for Sherry's sake. I don't mind what age my car is as long as it's still working. I have a nice car, but it doesn't have to have this year's number plate on it. So, we are working on it though, and there's a vast amount that can be done there. Either AI or AI-like automation. I mean, where simple computer development stops and AI starts is a blurry line to me.
Yeah.
Not being an expert, I'm sure a computer scientist could more define it. But you can imagine with the amount of new client conversations. I mean, we have 65 people in our new client team on shifts, weekends and days and evenings, talking to people who've had an accident, filtering through, deciding, yes, I will offer them our services, or no, I won't. And imagine if the AI could be picking out phrases. I mean, it could pick out head injury, it could pick out various phrases that could make it amber or green to send to a more senior agent. So there's filtering of vast amounts of information in questionnaires, and then vast amounts of information come in through disclosure in the cases and through medical evidence and medical records and medical reports. There's a lot of medicine in personal injury.
Yeah.
You need Black's Medical Dictionary on your desk as well as law books.
Yeah.
You could have a lot of help for the lawyers. I don't see it replacing the lawyers. I mean, I see it as a tool. And yeah, I mean, we use a lot of technology already. I mean, the days of paper files are very, very long gone. Everybody in our place has at least 2 screens. Everybody has a laptop that they can take anywhere with them and dock, and work on the train and work down at court. And I mean, I wish the courts could catch up because their technology is often sadly atrocious and we struggle then. But in the olden days, going to court used to be, lever arch files full of paper. I mean, boxes and boxes of them. Don't forget, you need 6 sets to go to court: 2 solicitors, 2 barristers, witness, and a judge. And that's a simple case before you have 2 defendants or anything like that. So maybe the trial bundle is 6. You need 6 of those. So you're taking all that paper. What a waste. So it is getting better and more digitized, and no archiving expense at the other end. When the client rings, it can identify the file because it knows their phone number. So there's loads of non-AI to do yet, and there's AI coming. We're not going to put it. We don't want to invent it. We want to see what others are doing and do it. But we are having detailed conversations and beauty parading the companies at the moment. Yeah.
Be interesting to know, and this will probably be more for your marketing guys, if what you're using the AI for there, because when you were kind of mentioning the phone calls and whatnot and relating that back to the PPC spend, that's where my mind went when you were saying that stuff.
Oh yeah, the people we work with on the marketing are using AI quite heavily. I was going to say, they would know more than I would, but I mean, when they have their own internal meetings, the minutes are produced by the robot. So they're a bit ahead of me. But there's just so much you can do. But we're never going to remove people from it, and I don't really want clients phoning up and talking to a robot. You know what I mean? The deal we offer them is unlimited access to your lawyer. If they need to phone us 3 times till they understand the complex letter, we will talk them through it 3 times, all within the fee we've agreed with them. And that's how it works.
The way I've always seen AI, it should be used almost to enhance the human element of it rather than take away.
Sure,
it gives you more time to do less of the mundane tasks that a robot can take care of. But the human element of speaking to someone, especially for something like injury claims, you don't want to completely take that away.
Yeah, sadly, tons of what a personal injury solicitor does is admin. So absolutely, if we can get rid of that, or obviously get it done, but by a robot or whatever, then yes.
Yeah. Well, James, I'm going to wrap it up there. I think that was a great chat. I really appreciate your time. If there was someone listening to this and they wanted to get in touch with you or follow you in any sort of way, what's the best way of doing that?
Well, you soon find me on the website. We're all there with our email addresses on the website at Express Solicitors. I'm on LinkedIn. I think you have to follow me nowadays because I've got a few followers. So I'm not sure you can do a normal link up like it used to be. You get to whatever it is, 30,000. So one of those methods, I would say, but we don't hide ourselves. Our email addresses are out there, and I always want to be available. If a client feels they need to get through to the CEO, then they need to get through to the CEO, or if people are interested in business or other opportunities, we try as far as we can. We try to get back to everybody. And thank you for your time today as well.
Okay. Thanks, James.